Well, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to Heterodox Academy's virtual event today. We are so excited to talk about HxA values at community colleges as part of our Beyond the Ivy League series. I'm joined today by three terrific panelists who come to us from different parts of the country and different parts of the community college wing of higher education. Larry Galizio represents the Community College League of California. Trista Nelson joins us from Glen Oaks Community College. And Mark Urista, in addition to being a campus community co-chair with Heterodox Academy, is a longtime professor and campus leader at Linn-Benton Community College. We'll be sharing more information about their biographies, but it's really a great time to be having this conversation. So as we welcome more participants into the call, we'll go through a few preliminaries this morning, then we'll get into the conversation this afternoon, I should say. First of all, as with all of our events at HxA, we encourage everyone to follow the HxA way as best you can. These are aspirations, but we try to hold pretty true to them. You can see them here on the screen. I'll also ask everyone, as you're going through on our live event, please take advantage of the Q&A box, not only to share your own questions you'd like us to pose to the panelists, but also to upvote a question that someone else suggests. And we'll be getting to a bunch of those throughout our time together today. The comments section or the chat will also be open, but the Q&A box is really helpful for us moderators. If you're not familiar with Heterodox Academy, welcome. We're glad to have you. We are academic insiders from all over the political spectrum, all over the disciplinary spectrum, all over the world. And what we care about is open inquiry, viewpoint diversity, and constructive disagreement. You can visit us at heterodoxacademy.org, subscribe to our newsletter, join our new Substack, become a member. Membership in Heterodox Academy is free, and you can find out more on the website. So again, we're glad to have everyone today. Let's get into it. We haven't had a conversation in a minute at HxA about community colleges, but really, these are some of the backbone, I guess, of higher education, with millions of students served. And for many Americans, for many Canadians, for many students around the world, community college campus is one of the first places where they experience higher education, academia, a taste of research and sort of the life of the mind at that higher level. We're really interested in talking a little bit about sort of what the issues that we care about at HxA, how they look on a community college campus. And so I guess the first question that I want to pose to our group is, what are some of the uniquenesses, maybe unique challenges, maybe unique advantages of community colleges? Maybe for those of us who've been in and around them a little bit, but maybe mostly what we know we learned about on, a sitcom TV show. We're not quite as sure what makes a community college different than other institutions. Larry, maybe I can begin with you, because in your role, you know the system so well.
Sure. Well, first, I want to thank you, Michael, and HxA for, as Deidre said in the chat, focusing on community colleges. I think anyone who's involved with a community college understands that more than 40% of the undergraduates in the United States are at a community college. So that's a massive number of students, over 7 million undergraduate students in community colleges nationally. California has over 2 million students. So regardless of what you might think of community colleges, we have a large footprint and we impact a lot of students and certainly a lot of communities. But in terms of the unique challenges, so first, I would take the word unique with an asterisk, understanding that regardless of the sector of higher ed, you have these issues existing. I think, though, some of these might be more prevalent in terms of challenges. So first and foremost, in a nation with massive inequality, community college students, you have a vast number of students who have financial stress, financial precarity. So there are clear data from the NIH to all higher ed research institutions that would tell you that in terms of outcomes, financial stress has a negative impact on educational and academic outcomes. Not hard to see why. So I think that's a very significant challenge for community college students. They also might not have had the most positive experience K-12, whether that's the lack of funding, whether that's, for a variety of reasons. So we do have students who come who are not academically prepared and maybe have not had that type of environment where there's open inquiry, where it's more industrialized education and standardized education. And so that's also, but just to get back to, because I think financial distress is the biggest issue that is most difficult for students. So in California, 2/3 of the students who were surveyed in a large survey either experienced food, housing, insecurity, or homelessness. More than 40% were food insecure. There are also mental health challenges which are linked directly to those elements. So I think those issues are so significant, and I'll let my colleagues talk about the other element to this in terms of finances, which is inadequate funding. We have some of the most challenging students, and we'll get into this later, but we tend to have the lowest funding of any public sector of higher education in any state.
Thank you. Trista, let me bring you in. So would you like to add to that? As people think about higher education, what's unique about the community college system beyond what Larry was mentioning?
Well, it's a variety and diversity of our students because we can have a variety of different age groups. They can be working and juggling a family. I have a pack and play in my library with toys just for the mom who needs, or dad who needs to come in and study. So we get quite a bit of diversity, but like Larry said, we do struggle, especially on the staff side, with time and with money. We are often wearing so many different hats, doing so many different things on the college. I can be in here doing something like this, and then in a half an hour, I'm out there checking out a book to a student. So there's time constraints and money constraints to be able to bring these types of things as well.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, you've been a leader in civil discourse and debate and communication, not only at Linn-Benton, but I would say around the country. Does that hit different on a community college campus than at a four-year state university or a private school?
I think it does, for the reason that Trista referred to, in terms of the diversity of life experiences that we see with our students. I can't think of any other place in society other than maybe a jury room where you're going to be bringing people from different facets of life together to engage in serious, rigorous intellectual conversation about really big topics, such as poverty or racial injustice. And as a result, community colleges have an amazing opportunity, I think, to serve as a laboratory for figuring out how to engage in civil discourse in our pluralistic, ethnically diverse, and other forms of diverse society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that includes generational age diversity, right? Different kinds of, I guess, class diversity. So the image of the elite, coddled, out of touch undergraduate student who's maybe, experiencing college as a luxury good really doesn't apply at the kinds of institutions we're talking about. Would you say that, Mark?
Correct. I think we should also need to talk about the fact that many community college students are the first in their family to ever attend college. So in addition to the financial challenges, there's also the ability to know how to navigate higher ed. A lot of students just do not know what questions to ask. They don't know what the social norms are for trying to get the assistance they need or to navigate themselves from entering the door to walking across that graduation stage.
Mhm.
But one of the strengths of a community college, of course, is that so many faculty are able to focus primarily on serving students. We're not burdened with research. Our job is to be the best teachers and the best faculty that we can be for students in the classroom. And we're also fortunate enough to be in small classes compared to big universities, particularly for general education lower division classes. Um, I set the goal of knowing every single student's name by the end of week 2. And that allows us to provide a personal touch that students at larger universities may not be able to experience with their professors. And I think it also just allows us to create an environment that is more conducive to civil discourse by establishing rapport and trust.
And Michael, if I could just dovetail on that a little bit, and just in terms of the diversity, I mentioned some of the challenges, but I do think, as Mark alluded to and Trista as well, there are the type of diversity is there's intergenerational. You also have a larger percentage of students who are military connected, a term that's utilized. So whether that's somebody who's served in Iraq or Afghanistan or a spouse. So you have a lot of military connected students in California community colleges alone. We have 55,000 veterans, active duty service members, and dependents who are enrolled at California community colleges. You also have, in California, we have over 20,000 justice impacted students, whether they are currently incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, on parole. We also have a large swath of undocumented students, although we cannot detail the number because of the law. We're fairly confident that there are some 50 to 70,000 undocumented students. So you combine that with Pell eligible, lower socioeconomic, but we also have more and more high school students taking classes in dual enrollment. And we do have people who transfer to Ivy League. I work with someone at the League who was at Pasadena City College, and she transferred to a small college back east that some of you might know called Yale and graduated there, but now it's come back. So we have the panoply. We just happen to have a lot more who are underserved, underrepresented, and certainly financially challenged.
So I think as Mark alluded to, this is a unique kind of educational setting. And many of the issues that HxA cares about and works on have to do with really constraints, I would say, on intellectual discourse, on the life of the mind. Ways in which our cultural patterns can hold us back from really doing truth seeking, seeking understanding with each other, whether that's from formal policies or whether it's just from a culture of kind of being cautious and censoring yourself and not really saying what's on your mind, and as a result, not really getting the lesson out of a classroom. I want to think that perhaps some of that chilling environment concern may apply less at a school where folks are not all living on top of each other. They're more commuting. They're more different in the first place. But I imagine that some of those challenges do come up. Mark, if I can go back to you, I mean, how have you seen those national conversations play out at LBCC?
One of the things I really love about community college students is that they are gritty and resilient, and the vast majority usually are not afraid to tell you what they think. However, one of the challenges is that many just are ignorant about some of the subjects that we are discussing, in terms of politics and social issues. So, for example, a lot of colleges right now are having very passionate debates and discussions about what is happening in the Middle East. Um, I had students last spring who couldn't tell you the year that Israel was founded, why the country was founded. They couldn't tell you the difference between Hamas and Palestinians. So I'm just saying there's a basic level of ignorance. That said, it's also incredibly exciting when you get students up to speed and help them become more educated on these topics, and then seeing where their mind goes. They start to ask really good questions. And in a way, they'll say things that I think may be considered impolite or that are considered taboo that I get really excited about when it comes to creating civil discourse.
So as you've done that, and I think I know a little bit of the background here, Mark, but can you tell us, I mean, what are some of the steps that you've been doing on campus to bring that out and to sort of bring the civil discourse appreciation and practice, into the community college experience?
Well, fortunately, we have institutional support. Our college president is a strong supporter of our HxA campus community and lets all stakeholders know that. We also regularly have events and activities that are related to heterodoxy on campus. One of my favorite activities that we do, which seems to work really well for a commuter campus, is a whiteboard where we will ask a question and people will have the opportunity to stop by and provide their response and read other responses. Right now, the question is whether people should vote yes or no on Measure 118, which would effectively create a universal basic income in the state of Oregon. So this is an opportunity for people to be able to participate in civil discourse without coming to an event at a certain day or time, something that, once again, can be kind of challenging on a commuter campus. I've had colleagues tell me the prompt that you put up on the whiteboard, that actually led to a very rich discussion in the classroom. So I think we've figured out ways to make these small little additions to our campus communities that begin to create ripple effects and that allow for open inquiry, viewpoint diversity, and constructive disagreement to occur in a variety of spaces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Trista, let me bring you in here as well. So you're, politically speaking, you're in a battleground state, and you're certainly in a place that has diversity of opinion on not only the Middle East conflict, but any number of questions that might be in the news. At the same time, as you said, your students are busy, sometimes have other things that are top priority. Taking care of your family, doing a job, and getting your work done is plenty for anybody. How do you see some of these trends showing up at Glen Oaks?
Well, we definitely don't have any protest. I will tell you that much. We can have discussions. We are in a very, very rural area. We have wetlands and cornfields and forests all around us. We're very much in the middle of nowhere. So I actually found the HxA, and I've been able to, because of being part of this, I'm able to find things to bring to the college. It's really difficult because everything seems to cost money, or a lot of time needs to be involved. So the things that we bring are often things that I have found on HxA, like for instance, what is his name? I wrote it down. Simon Cullen and Nick DeBella created the Sway AI that encourages conversations. And I had just had a conversation with our philosophy instructor on how difficult it was for him to have engaging conversations online. And I was able to bring that to him, and he was able to check it out. And I have yet to check back with him to see if he's been able to use it and what he actually thinks of it. But it's little things like that, or we recently, I'm also the co-chair of the DEI committee, and the other co-chair and myself got involved with Irshad Manji's Moral Courage College, and we became mentors in that, which is all about having constructive conversations with people with different viewpoints other than your own. And so now we're able to bring those workshops not only to our staff and students, but also hopefully eventually we'll open that up to the community as well and do some more of like the workforce development in that regard as well. So a lot of times it's little things that I'm able to bring, even if it's a webinar that's open to everybody from HxA, and I just have pizza in the library and say, come watch this webinar with me. It's just little things at this point that I'm able to do.
That's great. And so I guess I'd like to I want to make sure that we leave some time to get into to questions from our attendees. But I'd like to turn for a moment to the faculty experience. And I didn't warn our panelists that I'd be asking about this, but it's fair game, I think. So most of our members are faculty. You know, it's, as you referenced, Mark, community college faculty life is more focused on teaching. But I'm curious about sort of what the rest of the faculty experience, I suppose, is and how that might differ. I won't name any names, but I've spoken to quite prominent people who have considered a change to community college teaching from much larger four-year institutions, partly out of a desire to get away from some of the sharp knives, rhetorically speaking, that seem to be out, but at the same time realized, oh, this is a lot of work. This is a very different context. This is you know, something that would require a big decision. Larry, as we look out at, you know, large community college systems in states like California, are there big differences in the faculty, not only themselves, but the dynamics that go on a campus of community colleges?
Yes. So I just, for the record, I taught 16 years at Portland Community College. I was a full-time faculty and directed the speech and debate program there. And I converse with faculty leadership here. First, I would be remiss if I didn't make sure that I clarified that California is not a system of community colleges. We are more a confederation of locally governed districts. And so that goes back to that diversity and puts the community in community colleges. So just as Trista talked about her rural serving institution at Glen Oaks, we do have those in California, believe it or not, but we also have urban, suburban, you know, so the panoply of California. So just for that. In terms of faculty, the knives are out here too. They might just be different colored knives and maybe different shapes and sizes. But I would say that first and foremost is just your course load. You might teach, if you're lucky to get a full-time faculty position, and that's a minority of faculty, unfortunately, because we don't have the funding. So 70% or so of faculty at some institutions are part-time, but you might be teaching 5 courses a term. If you want to do research, you're going to have to carve out time during the summer or yourself. The expectations for committee work are also very high. In California, so-called participatory or shared governance is really important. So full-time faculty are serving on many committees, just I think like their counterparts at four-year institutions. But you do have the smaller class sizes. You have to really love teaching. You have to really be able to teach to a mixed group. In other words, you might have someone who, English is their third language, and a lot of states have eliminated so-called remedial education, as California has. So you might have someone who's struggling with English, and then you might have a really brilliant student who just doesn't have the funds nor the time nor the support to go to a university, even though they clearly could do that. So that's a major challenge for faculty is just how to teach at multiple levels. And I'll stop there.
Mm-hmm.
I'll jump on that for a second there. Half of our students are high school, literally half are high school. So our faculty a lot of times are teaching at the high schools. So they're interrupted by the bell, the loudspeaker, all of that stuff. So they have, and they can get very upset about that. Don't get called down to the office during their class, So they're dealing with lots of different, a different experience than I would say probably a traditional faculty member would.
And forgive my ignorance, Trista, but how does that happen? These are early college programs and then they end up hosted back in the high school?
Yes. When about 12 years ago, it was looking kind of rough off into the future, and we got a new president, and he decided that high school was the way to go. So we were one of the first early adopters to the early middle college program, which is the 5-year program. And at the 5th year, you graduate with both your high school diploma and your associate's degree at the same time. And so we get a lot of those students.
I remember teaching at a high school when I was an adjunct down in California and having that bell go off consistently during the public speaking class that I taught. Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I just want to add is, once again, a lot of the students are first generation, so they don't really know what the expectations are when you're taking a college level class. I found that I've had to have a lot of heart-to-heart talks with students about what appropriate behavior is. And I think that could be quite a bit of an adjustment for someone who's come from a university setting or maybe an Ivy League setting. Clearly, there are different cultures between a student body that primarily comes from upper middle class and higher households and households that are blue collar.
Sorry, I lost my next question. I guess so we've sort of painted a picture, and there was one question in the chat that I know we shared a couple quick answers with by text, but I want to pose it to our panelists because I think it's a very interesting one, and it has to do with perception. How can we shift the narrative to position community colleges as a strong first choice option for high school graduates? The questioner asks, many students are frequently encouraged by counselors to pursue only 4-year universities, overshadowing the benefits and opportunities that community colleges provide. Now, I think with this group, we'll get some strong answers to that question as we have here in the chat. But also, I think there's this larger question about, what would be the best way for us to take advantage of this, especially in a time when many Americans and Canadians have grown skeptical of the investment in a very expensive 4-year degree. Should this be prime time for community colleges, Larry?
This will shock you, but I would say yes. Yes, it should.
I got some harder ones later, but please go on.
Yeah. I mean, it's an individual or family choice. And I don't think community colleges are the right choice for all students who want to pursue higher education. At the same time, I do think for a student for whom finances are a challenge, you should look to a community college. In California, we have very low costs for tuition. It's only $46 a unit. The challenge in California are the housing costs and all the other costs. But so affordability and access are foundational to community colleges. So I think that's one reason to look there. Convenience, I think students, the institutions, even though they have limited funding, try their best to offer student services and access and both online and on-ground courses. So I think you should look there. And if you're not sure what you would like to major in or what your career trajectory might be, take those first 2 years of general education at a community college to help you discover and take a variety of courses while you're not accruing as much debt. So I think it's pretty standard recommendation, but I believe it really still holds, especially as costs keep continuing to rise for higher education.
I also want to highlight that there's been a growth in dual enrollment programs, because I do think there are a lot of young students who want the college experience. And it is true, you're going to probably get more of that at a university than a community college. However, I just look at our college, LBCC, we're about 15 miles from Oregon State University, and we have a satellite campus in Corvallis where OSU is located. When I teach at that satellite campus, the vast majority of my students are Oregon State students who are fulfilling bac core and general ed classes at our community college at half the price. Sometimes those students will actually take the same class with the same instructor who teaches that class at OSU at LBCC, once again for half the cost.
Right, just like the generic brand of mayonnaise, it's the same ingredients, save some money.
But it
So
is a different, I'm sorry to interrupt. It is a different experience though. Some of our colleges, and I'm sure this is true in Oregon and in Michigan, some of our institutions now have student housing. There's a recognition that basic needs are a real concern. So all of our colleges have food pantries and try to connect students with the types of student services that either they or the county might offer. So we happen to have really strong athletics in California. I mean, there are football programs and men's and women's sports. So you can have that real, what some perceive as the, collegiate experience. The other element too is if you didn't have a great experience in high school and you're now 42 years old and you find that you don't really enjoy what you're doing, it's a great place to see if you might find some other sector of the economy or some other interest that suits you better. I mean, we have what's the number? We have, probably 40% of our students in California are older than 25. So it's not unusual to have someone I keep talking about 40-year-olds for some reason. Maybe I wish I were 40, but with that large of a percentage of people who are changing careers or maybe have lost a job or just have moved to a new place, community colleges are great places to explore and to see, are there other avenues or opportunities for me? I think that's another important element, and you won't necessarily feel out of place as you might if you went to a more traditional, let's say 4-year, I don't like that term, but a baccalaureate degree granting institution where the majority of the students tend to be in that 18 to 22 year range, but we understand there are some older too.
right.
I'd just like to add one really important point to that is I've seen so many students who started off at LBCC with the intention of earning a bachelor's degree. And then after a few classes, they just realized a 4-year college experience wasn't for them. But they then transferred into a CTE program like welding or auto mechanics or mechatronics, and now have a degree and have been able to go out into our local community and get a good paying family job.
Right, and I think that sort of cuts against the traditional narrative, Mark, which is, sometimes community colleges is where students get cooled out or they settle or something like that. From the perspective of that mechanical career, it's where they just got started, right? So it's all a matter of whether you assume everyone is bound for a PhD or not. Larry, I wanted to go back to a point you had made because it connected to something you actually wrote for Heterodox Academy a few years back. Maybe we can share that link in the chat, but you were talking about how community colleges are actually pretty great sites for constructive disagreement and sort of understanding across differences. In particular, you cited a study that said non-traditional students tend to demonstrate more respect for others than do traditional students due to their experiences as adults, as parents, as employees, as caregivers. I wonder if, having that proverbial 40-year-old in the class isn't actually a benefit to the 19-year-old, and on the next seat over, just because of the variety that it adds. And I don't know, does that take away a little bit of the hothouse environment of we're all the same age, we all have the same profile, and we're sort of scrutinizing each other from that perspective?
It certainly has the potential to do that, right? It's impossible to completely generalize. but I've certainly witnessed, and I would imagine perhaps Mark and Trista and others who teach at a community college and have those, returning or post-traditional students, where you see sometimes a kind of mentoring, a mentor-mentee relationship that can form maybe just among two students, a younger student and an older student. But I do think the dynamic can have that effect. As Mark alluded to, there aren't many places in the United States these days where people not only it's intergenerational, but are actually discussing issues. Sure, you go to the supermarket and they're all ages, but you're probably not talking about the meaning of life or whether the minimum wage should be increased. But in a classroom at a community college, you are. And Mark mentioned that sometimes you have students who are underprepared for rigorous academe, and maybe their understanding of current or historical events are not as strong as it should be. At the same time, I've seen where you had a student who went to Iraq, went to Afghanistan, and they're talking about war and peace, and that changes the debate. Whereas it might be really easy to generalize about war and peace. If you have somebody who's actually served or has a spouse, it changes the dynamic, and it creates, I would argue, just a more diverse and an environment that's very healthy. Usually, it doesn't mean you don't have a lack of constructive engagement, but it changes the dynamic. And then also, and the last point I would make is lived experience. Someone who's been incarcerated, or someone who is a foster child, or somebody who's undocumented, or somebody who got laid off from a job, or someone who's divorced, or has drug issues, they're going to talk about these issues and understand them in a different way and contribute to a discussion that could be quite rich. And I think that does happen in community college classrooms.
Thank you. I want to get to a few more questions from our participants as they're starting to come in. I really appreciate those. Please keep adding them to the Q&A. And so I'll get right into them. Here's one. How do you deal with diploma mill attitudes, where administration implicitly pressures instructors to lower academic standards and inflate grades to appease student demand? All this financial pressure, I will add, feeds into a real institutional incentive to keep the customers happy. And we certainly hear a lot about that from our colleagues and members in the four-year institutions. Anyone want to take that one?
Just really quickly, and this may be flip, but I would say that's certainly not unique to community colleges. We don't have hedge fund managers as trustees who are threatening to withhold contributions or things like that. But I think there's, it's a real problem, and it's, what has it been 20 plus years where institutions of higher education at all levels have been advertising themselves in this instrumentalist way, sort of this transactional way. Want to earn $1 million more than you would if you only had a high school diploma, come to our institution. And so we're living those consequences, and it's very unfortunate. It's a real problem, but I don't think it's unique to community colleges.
All right, well, fair enough. You invite speech and debate professors on. They're pretty good rhetorically. But Larry, let me follow up with you. Yeah, but you've said a lot about all of the different backgrounds of students that come in, including those who've struggled in K-12. Do community colleges have a special duty to hold a certain line, to give students honest feedback about where they are academically, to even fail them sometimes, or is there like a special risk here that it all becomes sort of passing folks along?
Yeah, I think that's a real concern, a legitimate concern. But the first part of your answer, I would say yes, that it's up to that faculty and that institution to be honest, because you're not helping that student. And students get Fs and zeros. I know that happens, but it is a real pressure. And we've had a huge debate in California community colleges, and I think at other colleges, where there were a lot of data that showed that so-called remedial education or developmental education was something of a, valley of death, where people would take, 5 courses below college level algebra, and then they would just drop out. So we don't have that any longer, but it's still, the problems still exist.
Mhm.
It is a big challenge, and I think one of the major contributing factors is the increase in number of adjuncts that we have compared to full-timers. So when an argument needs to be made to hold the line in terms of preserving academic excellence, I can make that argument because I'm a full-timer. I have job security, but it's much more challenging for someone who has a part-time position and whose livelihood may be at risk if they push back strongly.
And Mark, is that, I know you're not speaking for your institution, but in your experience, I mean, this is not helped by the use of student survey data and teacher evaluations, right?
Student survey data can definitely play a role because obviously a lot of part-timers, whether they're right or wrong, have a perception that the feedback students provide will be an influential factor in terms of whether or not they're offered classes for the next term. There is one aspect, it's very controversial, but hey, we're at HxA and it's something that I think we should be talking about, the significant increase of online classes. I definitely understand the benefits of it, especially from a financial perspective. A lot of students want to take classes online. And if your community college doesn't offer them, guess what? Another community college will, and you lose that revenue. I definitely understand that. I also appreciate the fact that it makes education more accessible. So if there's a single mom out there who's working 40 plus hours a week, raising her kids, we want to find a way for her to get a good quality education. But we have to be honest, a public speaking class that happens in a classroom is very different than a public speaking class that happens asynchronously. And when it comes to quality and excellence, that is an area where we need to start to have serious conversations and have open inquiry, viewpoint diversity, and constructive disagreement to figure out how we can ensure that excellence continues.
Mhm.
I would say that everyone thinks they want online until they actually get online. And then it seems to be a different story when that happens. Because we've seen the same thing, and we'll hear from faculty saying, well, students want this. But then I'm out helping a student with their, trying to find their resources or navigate Canvas, and it's clear they haven't used a computer in a very long time. So there is definitely some issues there with so much of this being online that some of it is not beneficial.
Really interesting. I wonder if we'll see some new models emerging as those kind of trade-offs become more clear. Another question from the chat for whoever wants to take it. I also teach public speaking, and the issue I have, which might go to Mark's comments, is that students have nothing to talk about. They don't have passionate feelings about most issues. How would you suggest encouraging them to care about something? And maybe we could broaden that, excuse me, to include, before you debate, especially as a first or second year community college student, there's something you need to debate about, whether that's knowledge or a passionate motivation or something like that. Well, I guess she named you, Mark, so I'll go to you first.
I would say meet students where they are. So it is the second week here at LBCC, and students in my argumentation class have just delivered advocacy speeches. I asked them to choose a social issue that they care about and advocate for a specific action. About a third of the students chose a topic related to mental health and loneliness. Okay. So now I have a good idea of what they're interested in, and I can connect it to a larger, more complex topic, say regulation of social media, a really complex topic that's being debated in state capitals and in Washington, D.C. Surprise, surprise, a lot of students are really concerned about finances. Well, let's start off by talking about what some of their concerns and experiences are, and then connect that to a debate on Measure 118. Should Oregon implement a universal basic income throughout the state? So I understand a lot of students are ignorant. I started off at a community college. I was incredibly ignorant myself, but I had awesome teachers who understood my experience, my frame of reference, met me where I was, and then guided me to where I needed to be.
Thank you. I'll take another one from the chat here. Let's see. Each of you mentioned the student diversity within your communities, and people within that community that have obstacles when attempting to enroll, obtain a degree. What do your institutions do to encourage these potential students to register, enroll along with support them during their academic endeavors? So I think this is a general question about maybe sort of what's different and what kind of additional supports are there. I was pressing before about holding the line on academic standards, but for someone who's really ready to go through with it, but they just need an extra boost, is there a something that might be surprising that community colleges are doing to help facilitate that learning? Trista, maybe I can go to you. I mean, in your more rural context, is there anything that we would be sort of surprised to see if we came and visited campus?
Well, like I said, we're really small. So we have like maybe 1,200 students. Our FTE is mid 700, something like that. So we often talk about our college as it's a dysfunctional family. It's a family, slightly dysfunctional, but we're all a family. So when we have students come in, there is a real care for them, I feel like. At least our students come back to us years later, or they'll email me with questions that they have what they're experiencing off in university. So we do a lot of walking them through the process, even in some cases talking to their parents, because that's a thing now. So there's a lot of things that we do, and like Larry mentioned, we have the campus cupboard. We actually do have a dorm, surprisingly, as little as we are, but we have a housing crisis in the county overall. So that has helped our students. Just the level of personal attention that we are able to provide in a way that the university often is not able to do. And students will know our names, we will know their names as even staff members, not just faculty. So it's a much more personal relationship, I feel like.
So I could, again, I'm not on a campus, but I work with a lot of chancellors, presidents, trustees, and then faculty leadership and classified leadership, classified professionals, and used to teach. But I think what I see now in California, and I think all over really, is again, a recognition that basic needs are not being met, even though we're the wealthiest country on the planet. So every single community college in California has basic needs, something, helping with transportation, helping with translation, helping with childcare if they can, food, housing, connecting them with services. Every college has a veteran services center. And then there is a strong attempt to diversify the faculty. Within the bounds of the law, there is, trying to just make recruitment more affirmative so that the faculty reflect the student population, right? The student population in California is far more ethnically, racially diverse than are the faculty. And so there's a real attempt to do that at all levels. I think we see at the president and chancellor level, we have incredible diversity there. It's not where it needs to be, but it's much better. So I don't know about anything unique to community colleges other than there is certainly, and this became really noticeable during the pandemic, is it just takes one person to reach out to a student and say, hey, what's going on? I've noticed you weren't there, or something like that. And I think that ethos and that culture has been strengthened because of the pandemic and because all of us, we suffered enrollment loss, and there's been a lot more aggressive. Fortunately for many colleges, they're coming back, but that sort of personal touch is now understood as a necessity, if not a sufficient condition of success.
One short point that I'll add is a few years ago at LBCC, we launched an initiative called Bring Your Whole Self to Work. And the idea behind that was we wanted everyone to really let their authentic selves come out as employees, with the idea that that would help our diverse student body find someone who they could identify with some way. So maybe that's based on your identity, but maybe it's also based on your life experience. I know that because I started off at a community college and I'm pretty open about what my struggles were, I've been able to connect with a lot of students of various demographics. So that's one thing I really do want to stress is I think there actually is a lot of diversity right now at community colleges. We just need to make sure that people are aware of it because that diversity is not always visible.
So I want to get to another aspect of a community college mission, which came up in a question in the chat. And as we've got maybe about 10 more minutes here, that has to do with the sort of economic function. So several of you have mentioned, community college can be a place where you come back to school, where you change careers, where you do some retooling to your skill set. And let me try to put this in a somewhat critical way. That sounds really good. I know there are examples of that happening. On the other hand, our government is not famously good at deciding which economic trends are going to win out and designing training programs around them and funneling folks in. What people call industrial policy is always really, really challenging. Have we learned anything at the community college level of sort of what makes for effective kind of skills training and career prep that could benefit our larger country, our larger society? There's a lot I don't know about this topic, but I know it must be harder than it sounds.
I would say short answer, yes. And one advantage that community colleges have is that they're focused on their community. So if in northern San Diego, there's a lot of biotech, those institutions have ties and workforce partners with whom they converse, and they try to work on curriculum. And so you have those tight connections. Clearly, some institutions and some regions are better than others. If you're in a region of the state that is having massive challenges financially, you're gonna be challenged financially. So, which is certainly the case in some of our more rural areas. Excuse me, but I do think there's a recognition, and you see it at all college levels. Community colleges have a broad mission. So we do have that transfer mission where we talked about earlier, where you take 2 years and you transfer. In fact, half of graduates from the Cal State University system went to a community college. Almost 30% of graduates of the University of California, that's UCLA, Berkeley, started at a community college. At the same time, we have technical career, or what used to be called vocational programs. You want to be a nurse, you want to be a firefighter, you want to be a welder. So our institutions by design have to be in connection with and work with their local sectors. But I think the weakness in community colleges is we don't follow up after graduation. And some of that is resource, some of that is just history. We lose track of our students. So we don't have the kind of foundations and alumni networks that we need to have in following up on jobs. But it's the community geographical element that is combined with the business sector that is helpful.
Thank you, Larry. Trista or Mark, do you want to get in on that one?
I think Larry makes an excellent point about following up with alumni. I'm in the liberal arts space as a speech communication instructor, and I have had a lot of students who graduated and now have professional jobs say, participating in the civil discourse program, having discussions with people from different walks of life about really controversial, sensitive issues has actually helped me better engage coworkers and clients. It's given me a confidence that I didn't have before. Whenever I get anxious about needing to have a difficult conversation, I can look back on specific experiences I had at the community college, and that gives me a boost of confidence. I had one student who got a job as a research analyst at the Bonneville plant. This is part of the US Department of Energy. And he was going against students or people who had graduated from Caltech and MIT. After he was hired, he was told it was your experiences with the civil discourse program, the ability to engage with viewpoint diversity that gave you the edge. All of the finalists demonstrated they had the hard skills, but it was those soft skills that really made you stand out.
Yeah, and I hope that that is a trend and a sign of things to come. You know, it strikes me that community colleges have a potential to shape the higher ed experiences of so many students by introducing, you know, the right way to think about ideas and disagreement, and to welcome them into that sort of challenging arena, but also could just become a place where you go and the teacher tells you the answer, just like in middle school. And so I think what we're hearing is that there are tools and there are practices sort of bubbling up, at least in some places where, you know, that's not the approach. Before we go to just wrapping up, let me squeeze in one last comment here. Stephen asks, we have overwhelming student demand for online courses. Almost 60% of our students ask for only online courses. 87% take at least one. It's a relatively new mode of delivery. I hope we continue to develop the technologies and skills to make this a successful form. Vilifying them or asserting that the only way to deliver a subject is the way we've always done it is counter to what our students need. I don't think anybody here would disagree with that, but you know, let me just put it out there, not only online, but other kinds of technologies. Trista, you mentioned one developed by one of our HxA members that's using AI to bring people into kind of constructive disagreement with each other. Are there technology trends that we should be thinking about that'll be hitting community colleges, or that we can steal from them? I don't know. Take this any direction you want to go.
I think AI has really opened up the door to a lot of things. I keep going to different things where it's either encouraging students to read deeper on a text level, or how, like the Sway, where we're working with people to have conversations. I think this is only going to grow and get better. And one of the final things I'd like to say is that I think that sometimes HxA can be a little intimidating, especially if you're a community college person. You start getting involved in this and you realize everybody's from the Ivy League and everybody's super intellectual. I get past that and join and participate, because it is very, very valuable.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And while we're doing the last word, let me ask you, Trista, do you have somewhere online or otherwise where people should find you or follow you, or is that not your style?
That's that. I left the miasma a long time ago and I haven't went back. So you can email me at Glen Oaks and I'll be sure and get it.
Excellent. Larry, let me go to you next. Do you have a last thought you'd like to share, and where can people find you?
I like if people can find me in person. If you're in the Bay Area or Sacramento, but Community College League is the statewide association for all California community colleges, and it's ccleague.org. And thank you to all the guests, and thank you to HxA for doing this.
Well, thanks for being here. Mark, I'll let you tell us where we can find you, and you'll get the last word about HxA values at community colleges. No pressure.
I'd be happy to connect with anybody on LinkedIn. Just search for Mark Urista. I should pop right up. If you'd like to learn more about LBCC's Civil Discourse program, you can go to our college's website, Linn-Benton.edu, and search for Civil Discourse program. Also, make sure the link appears for you to see in chat. Final word. Well, we talked a little bit about the Ivy Leagues, and I am thinking about a critique I have to this book, The Coddling of the American Mind. One of the recommendations at the end was for top-tier universities and Ivy Leagues to admit older students to bring more viewpoint diversity. I was a little disappointed that they didn't specifically say admit more transfer students, because there are a lot of talented students who will bring that life experience and viewpoint diversity to your institutions.
All right, any admissions directors on the line? I hope you're paying attention. I want to thank all of our guests and panelists and everybody who came today. Our recording will be in our YouTube channel, and we're looking forward to the continued conversation. You know, at Heterodox Academy, there's a lot that we disagree about. We hear things that we don't agree with, and we say things that we don't agree with the next day because we change our minds. But it's really a unique organization of academic insiders who share these overall values. If you're not a member, I hope you'll consider joining. You can find us at heterodoxacademy.org. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.